No job is too difficult, dangerous, or deadly. In color. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Mission Impossible. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy fact, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And welcome back to our Swingin' 60s Spy Summer. All this summer we have been breaking with our usual formula to cover exclusively fictional spy movies and TV shows made or set during the golden age of spy cinema, that is, the 1960s. So once again, put on your go-go boots and your ascot because it's time to get groovy.
All right, and this week we have some guests with us. I mean, we figured if we're going to talk Mission Impossible, we should get one of the many Mission Impossible podcasts out there, and the top two were busy, so we got you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding.
We were the most available.
No, you guys are actually the best experts on this subject matter. We have from Mission Impodible, who actually covers the TV show.
Hi, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Nathan.
And so you guys started your podcast how long ago?
Well, you're saying it's summer right now, so it's been about a year.
That's true. Ah.
But, I'll be honest, time doesn't mean anything anymore. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
At some point in the past.
If I looked at a calendar and it said it was 3 years in the future and I got hit by a car, I would definitely...
I was thinking about that throughout this whole episode, just because, well, we'll get to other parts of it later that was like, oh, well, this is shockingly relevant now, but just the fact of, okay, being stuck in a room for that long and not having no concept of time, really, it seems a little relevant now.
Well, that's the thing about this old Mission Impossible show is going through and watching it, it is freakishly relevant. A lot of the episodes you're just sitting there going, oh my God, really?
We covered an episode with a rigged election.
Oh
where
boy.
An unarmed black man is shot in the back by a police officer. And that's a whole subplot. And that's maybe like the third most relevant.
Yeah.
So I have a little experience with the TV show. I've seen a few episodes here and there. Zach, what's your experience with it?
Nothing. I knew nothing about it except that Leonard Nimoy was in it. So I was waiting for him to show up.
Well, I think he's not until some of the later seasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, joke's on you. You got. Gaslighted you hard as fuck. Wait till season 6.
So should we get into the episode?
Yeah, this one's called Operation Rorschach, right?
Not quite. Operation Rogosh.
Yes, this is episode 3 of season 1, and if you can find it, you can go and watch it before we start talking about it.
So, here's the synopsis. Rogosh is an operative for a country hostile to the United States. When he strikes, he typically leaves dozens, if not hundreds, of bodies in his wake. Rogosh has been spotted in Los Angeles, but he will not crack under normal interrogation methods. Briggs comes up with an unusual plan. IMF stages an accident where pedestrian Rogosh is struck by a car. When he awakes, he appears to be in a prison in his home country. 3 years later.
Well, that kind of gave away a lot about the episode.
I don't know how you summarize this otherwise.
Yeah. It does, but it's also, it's a lot of first act stuff. Like
that's true.
All of that with the car wreck, I think that might happen in the first 5 minutes of the episode even.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching this and going, just holy crap, they just straight up hit that guy. What?
I got a question. So, because I'm trying, I've seen a couple episodes, but it's been a while. Do they usually start with just going right into the theme song? Is there a cold open sometimes?
There's no cold open except for in the 80s show. They will do a cold open that will usually be like something involving the villain and is very cheesy. And then they go to the not going to try and get you guys sued. But yeah, this is a little bit unusual despite it being a template episode in the fact that usually you get him getting the mission briefing. He goes to an apartment, pulls out the dossiers. You had all that. Then there's usually a part where they open on them showing some sort of gadget, and they're like, and we have to convince Rogosh of this. And then, everybody's like, that sounds impossible. And then, they end up doing it. They're usually not that hammy. They don't say, oh yeah, that sounds impossible. It's usually oh, it's a suicide mission. And then they're like, yes, but it's not impossible. Actually, that's still cheesy. But yeah.
And this is why we're podcasters, not writers.
Let Nathan fool you. It is cheesy in the show, too. He's just cheesier.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. This mission just got a little bit more impossible.
Oh, I love that is from the with the MI2 Ben Stiller skit, which is my favorite thing about MI2. But
I
we
was
will
about to say,
talk about
arguably
that
the
in the
best thing
future.
about that.
Yeah, so we have the credits scene with actual clips from the show. That's a thing that they do every episode, right? It's always from that episode.
Yes.
And it still
actually,
persists to you go.
you were going to say the same thing I was, which is everything Mission Impossible, they do that. The
Mhm,
movies, it's always clips from that movie, the
Mhm.
remake show, which is just a sequel show, and this. It's always out of context spoilers. They're pretty good at showing it and never actually giving away a real spoiler. Like, there's
Yeah.
only been one or two moments where you've gone, "Wait, what? I don't know that I wanted to know that," but yeah, it's a thing.
I mean, in the movies, okay, so there are a few deviations. In the 80s series, they show clips from every episode of the season or, whatever.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Uh-huh.
And they do that different for each of the 2 seasons that it ran. And there's Mission Impossible 2, which is special.
Which, yeah.
Where they just show JPEG videos of
of the Chimera. It was of Chimera, yeah. But we're not here to talk MI2 as much as I'd love to do that.
I've always been curious about the pitch meeting for that because it's relatively unique to this franchise. And can you imagine the creator pitching the studio hey, I need money, I want to make this spy show, and check it out. So at the beginning of every episode, we're going to have a hand light a fuse, and as the fuse goes, we're going to show clips that haven't happened yet. It's going to be great. Just the producers going, no?
We covered Mission Impossible 1, or the 1996 one, the first movie, and we talked about this. And I mentioned that in Battlestar Galactica, every episode also had clips at the end of the opening credits. But I feel like those did give things away, whereas the only stuff this gave away was that it looked like it was going to be an action-packed episode, which was not the case.
Well, the whole thing, and we talked about this a little bit in a Patreon episode that you weren't on, Aaron, but the whole purpose for the theme was to engage people while they're making a cocktail in their fucking living room. And then they'd see clips from the episode and be like, okay, I'm a little intrigued. And then that would hopefully carry through enough to get through the mission briefing and the apartment scene.
I like the assumption that just in the 60s, Americans were all alcoholics, much more than they are now.
True.
It's true.
Yeah,
I've seen Mad Men.
Well, it definitely is exciting, and it definitely grabs your attention, this opening bit, especially with the fuse going down. Or is it a hand, or I thought it was
a hand lighting the fuse.
It's the hand of the creator of this show, just so you guys know. It's the hand of Peter Graves, and they do a really weird dolly camera thing. Look it up on YouTube. It's funny.
I've seen that. Oh, yeah, so speaking of Peter Graves, who plays Jim Phelps, who, Zach, you'll remember in the movie was played by, now I'm forgetting his name.
Jon Voight.
Jon Voight, yeah.
Right.
No Jim Phelps here. So this is the first head of the IMF, Dan Briggs.
He is the Captain Pike of the Mission Impossible.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, that's a good comparison. I'm going to talk about Star Trek later, so I'm glad we set that up.
Just to say something a little interesting, and I'm not sure whether you guys knew this. So Stephen Hill is our lead, Dan Briggs. He is a Jewish man, and he's Orthodox. He basically couldn't deal with the scheduling. On Friday nights to Saturdays, he could not schedule episodes. So there are various amounts of episodes this season where Dan Briggs will show up, usually in footage from a previous episode, getting a mission briefing, and then say, well, I know this, I know your head target because, I don't know, we went to a cocktail party once, so you guys have to do this mission, and then he bails.
It seems weird to me that an Orthodox Jewish person would want to be an actor with that limitation.
I have no idea. Apparently, he was difficult to work with as far as the stunts go. There was one episode where he had to be on a rafter and just decided, fuck this, I'm not getting out of my trailer. And Barbara Bain, who plays Cinnamon, who is wonderful, ends up being the lead of that episode. But proceed. I'm sorry. I keep derailing you guys with fun facts.
No worries. I mean, that's why we have you on here. Yeah.
That's what podcasting's all about.
We don't have that experience about the TV show, so it's good to know. All right, so we start and it very does this? I assume this doesn't happen too much. Is that it actually says what month and year it's supposed to take place in,
Does
but
not
it's
happen
important for this
often.
one. Yeah. So it says like October 1966. We see Dan Briggs pull up in a car, goes into the car next to him, and opens up the glove compartment. And in there, he finds the tape and an envelope. And it's not like a usual. Well, I don't know what cassette players look like in 1966, but it was interesting. You don't insert anything; you just sort of place it on top, and it plays.
It was a weird portable reel-to-reel, basically.
Yeah, I get really confused by the technology in this show. I remember we were recording an episode, and I wrote like an entire 2-page thing, just like, "Oh, what is this device? It was so weird. It has like a cylinder," and you guys were like, "Oh, it's blah blah blah," and I'm just like, "Oh fuck, I'm young."
Well, the other thing that happens all the time in this original first season run is the prevalence of open air furnaces. So many times they destroy the message in the usual manner, which is like he just walked up to a trash can that's burning something or to this furnace in the middle of a factory and was like, no big deal. Let me just throw this in here and walk
all
away.
The time. And eventually they get to the point where they actually coin the phrase self-destruct. So
right. See, I was waiting for that, but there wasn't that. When they have his mission little briefing, it said, yeah, like you said, it says destroy it in the usual manner.
I think I even have it down that it says, please destroy this. And he also says your mission if you decide to accept it.
Instead of choose to accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a lot of weird variations on it. What was it like? God, was it episode like 16, Aaron, where they finally do it like the right way?
We haven't yet seen by Rogosh too much of the stock footage. Like they clearly haven't made it far enough into their schedule to start having to shoot around Stephen Hill. But the opening to this episode, I think, is used in at least 2 other episodes in the first season. Just bits and pieces of it cut here and there. Like I know Whole Hog, the whole sequence is used in like episode 8 or 9. Like it's not far away.
Yeah.
And I guess they can do that because you never like see him talking or anything. So it's just you can put an entirely different mission over it, just have different photo insert. Makes sense.
And on our podcast too, we have a lot of discussions about the mission briefing because it raises a lot of questions about how the IMF actually functions.
That's a very good question.
Like you start wondering, do they get their missions? Do they have lives outside of the IMF? Because when he goes through his labeled IMF packet and starts picking people, like it's pretty clear that Cinnamon's a relatively famous model, and Roland Hand, who is Martin Landau's character, is kind of this imitation celebrity,
man of 1,000 faces.
Man of 1,000 faces. And so, like, they clearly have lives, but we still don't understand if they go in somewhere and get a mission brief, or if like Dan Briggs is just walking around town and all of a sudden, like, boom, somebody's giving him a mission brief and he had to go get lunch right after that. Just like we have lots of questions.
Another big question that I always have are like all the second parties that like come in and say a passcode to him. Fuck it. I'm sorry. I'm going to ruin this a little bit. It's not going to full on ruin it for you, Aaron. But in the 80s Mission Impossible, there was an episode where Peter Graves walks up to a mime and starts saying phrases to this mime, and he's like, mime is a great profession or something like that. He's like, it always requires a good heart. And then the mime reaches into his thing and grabs out like a key, goes behind his ear and shit. Hands it to him. He goes out. There's one where a Boy Scout leader meets him in the middle of the woods. It's goofy, but it begs the question, are these people on the payroll?
That is a great question. Zach, you were saying something?
Well, I just figured they were sleeper agents where they work for the IMF, but they have a cover and their real life is their cover.
That is one of the theories.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we kind of cover, like, or at least in our synopsis, we covered basically what the whole briefing he gets is that, there's this guy who's a terrorist, basically, and anywhere he goes, there's, terrorist events happen. But he won't be broken by usual methods, so they have to do something different.
They also say that thousands of lives are at stake.
Right.
So the consequences are
that's
large.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we get the apartment scene, which Zach is something you wouldn't be necessarily familiar with, but like every episode, he has his IMF dossier and which has photos of all these different people. And usually it goes, he picks out the 4 or 5 people that he always has on his team. And there's always a bunch of other photos that he tosses aside, including, isn't Bruce Geller like one of the people usually in there?
Yeah, he's like the first person that gets tossed aside, and he always found that to be really funny. Usually it's like
Bruce
members
Geller
of
being the creator of the show. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting dude, by the way. Not enough written about him. He he got fired off the show 3 seasons in because he went over budget.
Right.
Constantly, he'd have a vision for every shot of each episode that often wouldn't fully come to fruition. But this is one of the ones he got some more control over.
Nice.
But yeah.
Well, so what I found interesting about this particular apartment scene was that they don't go through the usual exercise where where he picks out Cinnamon and Barney and all the characters that and this is only the 3rd episode. He just the only one who of the usual players who's not out on the table already is Roland Hand.
Yeah, which is interesting, but it also lends itself to the unique structure of this episode.
Yeah,
that's true.
These first season episodes tend to fall in a couple of basic templates, and you can know a few minutes in what template you're doing. And this is one of those where they're like, no, we're not really going to explain the plan. We're not really going to explain who's involved. You're going to figure that as it goes along. Just go.
Right.
There's a decent chunk of them that are like that, where you, the audience member, are having to figure out the con as the people who are getting in on it are.
Right.
This one is specifically unique because it follows the villain throughout most of it.
That's true. Well, so for our listeners' sakes, if they haven't seen the show, let's go through all the different players that we usually have. So obviously we have Dan Briggs as the team leader, and then we'll have Roland Hand as doing disguises.
Specifically guest starring Martin Landau as Roland Hand. Because even though he is arguably the main character of the first season, he isn't actually a regular cast member until season 2.
Oh, wow. Did not know that.
Yeah.
So Barney Collier is your tech guy. He's basically your Luther Stickle of the original series.
Exactly.
Cinnamon Carter is your actress, so she plays any female roles that need to be there.
She's the honeypot.
Yeah. And then Willie Armitage is the muscle?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Peter Lupus is not in too much of the show throughout the full run, but he doesn't tend to do much beyond being tough.
The first episode, his role is to carry the big heavy case that Dan Briggs is hiding in, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's basically their production assistant.
Yeah.
He just does whatever random stuff that needs doing.
He's a goon.
Yeah, kind of.
But on the good side, yeah. Other people who were in the dossier who are used are, Ira Green, MD, Sonny Allison, who's a Daredevil driver, and the Horizon Repertory Players, who actors?
Wait,
is
did
that
you
what
get
that
all
was?
these from the files?
Yeah, I've slowed it down. It's you can barely see their names, and I pulled it. Yeah.
Okay.
This is established in this episode that they actually have a ton of actors at their disposal, and this sort of template of creating a whole different environment to convince somebody it's a different year or it's past the nuclear apocalypse, which they do later on in the show.
I can't wait.
That it's a dream where Roland Hand is Adolf Hitler killing this dude's wife. They get a ton of actors.
What?
Yeah, I'm not even fucking around. I mean, there's an episode of the 80s Mission Impossible where they have to convince a guy who is a Satanist that Peter Graves is the devil and every member of the IMF, including a ton of actors, are cult members / demons.
They did something similar to that in Burn Notice.
Really? I'd have to remember that Burn Notice episode. I don't.
Michael was I'm El Diablo and I have satanic powers.
Oh, I do remember that episode.
That one? Very memorable.
I love Burn Notice.
That is another good show. So let's get into the happenings. So we have a man who we find out is Rogosh exiting the hotel with another person who is... I have his name written down later on because he comes back. Laszlo, thank you. Yeah. So they're looking around. They see a lot of people following them. There's one guy who's climbing down a fire escape to try to follow them. Rogosh is crossing the street. He gets hit by a car.
Yes, and this reminds me of the climax of The City on the Edge of Forever when Edith Keeler gets hit by the car. Because the two guys are oh no, what are we going to do? The other guy's like, I could have saved her, Jim. I could have saved her.
So the person driving the car is the aforementioned Sonny. I don't remember his last name. Who's a daredevil driver, but we didn't really get a good look at Sonny.
He's not really a member of the team.
Yeah.
I don't even think we mentioned him when we brought up the team in our actual episode on Rogosh.
But I'm just like, if you don't know, it wasn't until I noticed what's his name, Barn. He was like, oh, I see. Paramedics, the cops, everyone is IMF. Okay.
Oh.
Because I just recognized Philip Morris. I was like, oh, okay.
Just to sort of bring it up, because this is the moment where the two Mission Impossibles collide. The sequence getting hit by the car and convincing somebody it is the future is used in Mission Impossible Fallout to great effect. And even McQuarrie was like, yeah, this was a throwback to Rogosh.
Nice. Yeah. I also did pick up on that, but it wasn't as extreme and thus much more plausible in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it wasn't 3 years later or whatever. It was
it was later. Like a month or a week. Yeah,
something like that.
I don't remember.
There's an episode that is essentially this later on in like season maybe 3, where this guy who has nuclear bombs is convinced that it is the year 2000 and the bombs have gone off, and he's living in a prison with this guy.
Oh my gosh!
Played by Martin Landau, and it's goofy, but proceed with this episode.
I was gonna say what's funny is that within 5 episodes, they flat out go, "Yeah, ghosts are kind of real," and acknowledge them, and they might kill someone in the episode. And so for me, I'm like, "Oh, no, this is kind of normal. This isn't that big a deal." Sure, they convince someone that it's 3 years later and that they've changed completely in this time.
Well, that reminds me, we were talking earlier about The Rock. Because we were talking about Sean Connery related, who at the time we were recording it recently passed. And do you remember how in The Rock they're like, oh, by the way, there are aliens. Aliens exist in this universe?
Yeah. Want to know what really happened at the Roswell?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Great film.
And who really killed JFK?
Yeah, it has that great ending line. It almost reminds me of like The Graduate, or all the great iconic endings where Nicolas Cage finally gets his national treasure stuff. He's like, honey, you really want to know who killed JFK? Well, I
was gonna say that just reminds me of National Treasure 2.
Front pew.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry for getting us on Nicolas Cage movies.
Let's get back to the show. All right, so they bring Rogosh into an ambulance, and so you don't get a lot of the actual Mission Impossible theme in this episode. You get the B theme, the plot.
Yes.
A lot, which I love that theme. And I think we've talked about it on our show before, that the first Mission Impossible is what really got me into spies. And so I had that soundtrack, so I like watched that movie over and over. So I knew that theme, even though I didn't know it was the plot theme. And I was like, oh, that's that other song.
Original Mission Impossible theme, just so you guys know. That's actually what Lalo Schifrin considers to be the theme for the team, which makes sense. And has been used more and more often in the movies, especially in Fallout.
Right.
But yeah, great theme.
The doctor. So I assume that this is the doctor that was in the portfolio. They go so fast, so I don't actually remember what they all looked like. I'm just going to assume there was that doctor. Injects him with something that'll keep him out for a few hours. When he got hit by the car, well, I guess Sonny was a daredevil stunt driver, so he knows how to hit a guy with a car without breaking any bones.
Surgical.
Yeah.
He's a surgical stunt.
The doctor says, yeah, no broken bones, but there are bruisings. But the bruising will also leave the same kind of marks that would be if he had been like heavily beaten.
Which is...
honestly, I'd buy that. Hear that, and I want to go, wait, what? No? But I'm like, I guess, sure, you bounce someone off a car. It's going to look like they got beat up.
I mean, of the things that are implausible in this, that is one of the least implausible. So, Rogosh wakes up in a cell. There are manacles hanging on the wall. It's a very small cell, although it looks like it's bigger than my first room in DC.
I saw that room. It was small. It looks like something from the Stasi prison in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And the ceilings are really high. So he looks up.
That was the other thing.
It's like a 30-foot high ceiling. Then he looks down, and then a rat lands on his shoulder. So I'm like, was that rat in midair when he looked up at it? And how high up when they threw it down on it?
I mean, and then is it the same rat or a different rat that's on the lamp?
I presume it was the same rat.
I gotta say, I do love the high angle shots of him in the prison and looking above. It's a lot more cinematic than you expect out of this era of television.
Yeah, definitely. Weird camera angles. What you'll get is, the 60s Batman where, all the villains are off on Dutch angles, but not anything like this.
For a show of this era, the Mission Impossible series, it continuously has pretty great cinematography. Like, there are some episodes where you can okay, this is a filler episode, they didn't care, or this is an episode where they had to restructure the entire thing because they didn't have their main character, and those are a little wonky. But whenever they have no, we recorded everything we intended to episode, it looks great consistently.
And you think this is one of those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, definitely. There are a lot of cool transitions in this episode. One I really like is the hand in the ambulance falling down the stretcher that leads to him.
That was good.
There's a really interesting transition later on that we can talk about where Dan Briggs is talking to Rogosh. Rogosh looks concerned about the trial.
Right.
To the right of him and sees Dan Briggs in another chair, which threw me for a loop because I didn't notice that the first time we had covered it, and I was just like, wow, this is weirdly artsy for 60s TV.
Definitely above and beyond what you'd need through just the plot or whatever.
Yeah, so he's in his cell. He looks through the keyhole out of the cell and sees all these other cells. He tries to call for help. No one responds. This is where I noticed, he's wearing a tuxedo now, not the blue suit that he was wearing before. And he starts looking through the tuxedo jacket for anything. He finds a bunch of cigarettes, a wallet with a bunch of foreign bills, some coins, and a card that says John Lopek, and then a photo of a woman who's Cinnamon Carter.
The lovely Barbara.
Yes, I didn't really recognize her from the picture, but
didn't look like usual. Well, I mean, usually when you see that photo of Cinnamon Carter in the show, it's that one headshot she has that's always in the binder. So when I saw it, I was like, I think that's Cinnamon Carter, but I'm not quite sure. She looks very different.
Also, I think she's smiling in the picture, and she never smiles during this episode.
That's true. Yeah.
I love that he sees that picture and wakes up like that, and of all the unbelievable things, he's like, oh yeah, I could score that.
So he tries to climb up to the very high window by using the manacles that are hanging, and then he starts looking around the floor, dusting off one of the bricks, which says the word Stefan, which we don't find out till later, but we're just going to say it now that it's the name of a prison in whatever his home country is.
I Googled this. I was like, is this a real place? I Googled Stefan Castle. It's from Sleeping Beauty. King Stefan's Castle is the first result of Stefan's Castle.
Right, because the father is Stefan. I would not have thought about that.
I was not expecting that.
All throughout this show, to keep from getting political or starting to offend other countries playing this, they do a lot of fake countries of sort of there would be weird emergencidad or some shit to mean emergency, weird language stuff. We often in the show refer to it as not Russia, not Germany, or not Cuba. Later on in the run, they tend to do actual Russia or actual Nazis.
Interesting.
But
I think there's only been one time in this first season where they've flat out gone no, this is a real country. This is a real place. The languages and everything matches. It's always a fake country. And also, it's always a fake country where the leader of that country engages in petty day-to-day business. So even though they're the prime minister, really, they're just a banker.
Looks around the cell and sees other people's names written in the cell, and someone has a carved 1968, but in Roman numerals for some reason. Yeah. Which, the only reason I can think of is that it's easier to carve the straight lines into stone than it is to actually carve a 9 and a 6 or an 8 into it, certain rounded numbers. I don't know.
I'm almost willing to guarantee you that is exactly why that exists. Because there was some production designer trying to carve 1968 into that, just going, I can't fucking do it, man. We're just doing Roman numerals and deal with it.
Carving it into a stone just reminded me of the, what was it,
2000
something? No, it's the Count of Monte Cristo. The 2000, 2-ish? I was somehow he was able to carve the words only God will judge me into stone. So it seems to be possible.
Yeah, it reminded me of the Monty Python. Was it Monty Python where he's he would have to chisel blah,
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's
It
another
reminded
good
me of that classic '80s film, The Count of Monty Python.
There we go. Oh, we're actually thinking of the same movie, as it turns out.
Yes, there you go.
Oh man, I want to.
Where were we? Oh, he sees a guard, tries to get the guard to tell him how long he's been there, and he also starts to hear a woman screaming. And as this is happening, we pan over to the IMF team in another room, and Barney's using a record player and a tape player and a bunch of tech to project the sounds of screaming. Cinnamon
so
is
funny.
over there picking clothes off a clothes rack.
I like that they have like a coat rack that they actually use it. It's like you'd think they're British with their like cleanliness. They don't just throw their coats wherever. This is an interesting detail. So this part reminded me of V for Vendetta, the fake prison and that to like break.
I didn't even think
Natalie
about
Portman.
that.
You're right.
That's a good pull.
And this movie also has like an interesting question of like, because this guy is a ticking bomb terrorist. Have you ever heard that term before? So like when torture was like a big hot button political issue, now we sort of know that it doesn't work. You're better off making friends with the guy. That's shown to be more effective. But what if you only have like 24 hours and you have a terrorist and you know the bomb's going to go off in 24 hours? Some people think it might be morally justifiable to torture in a situation like that, but no one knows whether it would work because it's such a specific situation.
Has the modern intelligence agencies tried to like tell them it's 3 years in the future?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Well, what's interesting about it, and I'm not sure if this is fully mentioned, so the accusation that's being leveled against Rogosh in this is that he is an American spy. And he's trying to prove his allegiance to a ton of American spies, which kills me. It's such a mindfuck. I absolutely adore that.
A lot of dramatic irony.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Rogosh finds a bug in the lamp, and he's like shouting, "There's a mistake. I shouldn't be a prisoner." And then Briggs, or no, I think it's Barney tells Briggs Dan Briggs that he found the bug, and he's like, "Good." It's like, "Oh, okay. So this is going according to plan." It's not like, "Oh, he found the bug. Now we're screwed."
Right.
There's a cool improvisational aspect to this. They don't know what this weapon is that Rogosh has. You know, they're just sort of improvising on the spot. And that's really what I enjoy about like my favorite episodes of Mission Impossible tend to have a lot of improvisation.
Because the main character of this episode is the villain, you don't actually get to see the improvisation even though it's there. So it's why I really like this episode is you're just dealing with the effects. Like, oh shit, no. Is that a big issue that he found the bug? We don't know. Maybe. Oh, no. It's cool. And that continues to happen throughout. Every time they do a reveal, because we're focusing on Rogosh as the character, we never know when the team is actually in trouble versus when it's all according to plan.
Right. That's definitely true. So outside the window of his cell, Rogosh can see that they're building a gallows. And then we go to Briggs walking around. He's seeing people like working on construction projects around. There's a giant portrait of someone. And this is like my question about who. Okay, so we know who the actors are. Like all the other bit players are actors. Who are these contractors? Like who's doing this like construction work?
They're the set people. Like they have to put together stuff for all these different productions, and they just got done working on Sleeping Beauty.
You answered your own question earlier when you were going through the mission briefs. These are the repertory players, you know?
Okay.
all the random like bit part extras that the IMF needs to fill this out. You know, they get day rates like, you know, at the time probably like $20
so they're both
a day.
actors and set builders.
Yeah, exactly. It's a weird organization, man.
Yeah.
The 60s took a lot of drugs.
Well, it's interesting because you're used to seeing 5 people. We're used to seeing like one spy or maybe a small team, but not a small army of people with all these resources. So it's definitely different.
Well, that army of people are not trained as spies.
That is one of the weird things about this set. It keeps getting bigger. A lot of the Mission Impossible episodes tend to be, here's this one little team, and yes, they often are gaslighting somebody like they are in this, but they're always infiltrating something or doing this or tweaking this like under the radar. This is one of the rare few examples where it's like, no, everybody involved, you see, is all a member of the IMF. Like the entirety of the IMF rocked out for this one mission.
Rogosh from his cell sees Cinnamon being brought somewhere by a female guard. Willie comes to go get Rogosh, says the prosecutor wants to see you again. He's like, again? Here's, as he's being brought, we hear a woman, presumably Cinnamon, crying out.
Mhm.
There's a guard who's listening to the radio, and there's announcements of a new prime minister of whatever country Rogosh is from, who's Emil Hatvani, and that Colonel Klimi, who is a special intelligence director who's been arrested along with a bunch of other people. Also, apparently, there's a new U.S. president, and there, Olympics records are being broken, and of course, all of this is just Barney making announcements on a shortwave radio.
To hilarious effect for me. I love when people are gaslit by radio recordings.
I just like Barney getting to do something.
Yeah.
As forward-thinking as Mission Impossible tends to be with its handling of race and sex discrimination, it's still a black guy in the 60s. So like he doesn't get to speak as much as he normally would in another show made more often, but he still manages to be one of the most useful people in every episode he's in.
Right.
Everybody's got a job to do.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So also, as they're walking around the grounds of the fake prison, they're like testing out the gallows with sandbags.
That's a real thing. They literally would. They either test it or there's a math formula that is used to determine how much rope you should give to make sure somebody drops far enough that their neck breaks but doesn't hit the ground. Because, when you get hung, your neck breaks and that's how you die. Or else it takes like minutes. And I was just watching, it was a special on this guy who has had a few movies made about him, who was Britain's head hangman. And he hung like 450 people over the course of his career because he was their hangman during the Nuremberg trials. So any Nazis who were sentenced to death, he killed. And by the end of his career, he ended up being a staunch anti-death penalty advocate. During the course of this, he used to go into that much detail of how long does the rope have to be because this person is 6 feet tall instead of 5 feet 8. And that's enough to make a difference. So now you know.
Yeah, there you go.
The last podcast on the left did a thing about executioners, which if you're familiar with that, it's like horror and comedy. And there's a bunch of ridiculous stories. And one of them, there was a executioner who was a very like sensitive guy. And one time when it like something went wrong, like I think he like pulled a lever and it didn't work or something, so he started like crying. And the person who's supposed to execute was like, "It's okay, buddy, it's okay." Truth is very strange sometimes.
Yeah, that is.
Reminds me of that one executioner who was supposed to kill Buckbeak in Prisoner of Azkaban. And ends up slicing a pumpkin.
Hey, you know what? Dude came out to cut something. He's gonna cut something.
There you go.
Exactly.
It's like a samurai sword. You don't put it back until there's blood.
Or pumpkin.
All right, so over in the prosecutor's office, we find out where that giant portrait was going, and apparently that's a portrait of the new prime minister. Roland Hand is playing the prosecutor. Rogosh is demanding to know why he's here. Hand says that Colonel Klimi is implicated already, but he needs a confession from them.
Yep.
And starts like giving him like, what did you do with this and that? He's like, I don't know. I don't remember any of this. We find out that Colonel Klimi, when Rogosh knew him, so in real time, is just a major, and he was the intelligence attaché in LA. But Hand tells him, no, you haven't been in LA in 3 years. It's 1969. This is the point where we get that confirmed, that what the timeline is supposed to be.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we should sort of just backtrack a little bit, just to say everybody's roles. So Dan Briggs is playing the role of Rogosh's incompetent lawyer, which is
defense
great.
Attorney,
It's one of my favorite uses of Stephen Hill so far, because he is a guy who is very, very flat throughout most of the show, but when he's given the chance to play a character like a drunkard or an incompetent lawyer, he sings. And then the other super confident, suave opposing counsel is supposed to be Roland Hand, who is like the attorney that you would absolutely adore having. And then Peter Lupus, Willie Armitage is just a security guard, as usual.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
/ heavy.
Yeah. And then Cinnamon, I guess since we'll go through this, she plays Rogosh's secretary / lover.
Yes. the person who you're constantly hearing screaming over the radio.
Rogosh says, no, I don't remember anything. I was in a car accident. I was with Laszlo. And as he's saying this, Roland Hands tells Dr. Zoltan to come in. And hold on, I know I have the actual doctor's name written down earlier. Ira Green. So Dr. Green.
Can I just say, we have recorded episodes of this 3 times in a row because we had recording issues, and this is the most thoroughly we've ever covered Rogosh. So this feels like the final nail in the coffin of an episode that I love. So
there you go. Hopefully you'll never have to talk about it again on a podcast.
So I'll probably talk about it, but it's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that we'll end up doing another episode on it somehow.
The doctor claims that he's been friends with Rogosh since he was arrested at a state reception. Which, all right. So this doctor is just flat out lying to him. He's okay with that.
Well, I presume the doctor is another agent, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, he is, but I'm just like, still, that just seems a little shady for a doctor. I don't know. Roland Hand asks the doctor if, this sort of type of memory loss is possible, and he's like, yes, delayed amnesia. Sure, it's definitely a thing.
Delayed amnesia does not sound real.
This is not new to the show by any means outside of here. I'm sorry, I think I may have just saw a murder hornet outside
oh, geez.
the window. That was the biggest bee I've ever seen. This is not new to the Mission Impossible team to use a doctor who will say whatever diagnosis that they need. I believe the Trump administration used them from time to time. I wasn't going for the Trump burn, but I just went in there.
It just happened.
It's going to happen.
You can join the cast of SNL.
So Briggs and his team are back in the office, and they say, okay, just let him keep digging and finding information. Don't be proactive. Just let him try to find it. We're going to get more information out of him that way. But they don't know how much time they have. And so Briggs is going to meet him as the defense attorney, and he says he wants to inspire a complete lack of confidence.
One of my favorite moments of this entire episode, because you don't get too many moments, and this is by design, where the characters interact in a way where they're not talking about the mission directly, or so what you do get for like character moments are usually members of the team giving each other shit. And I love Barbara Bain just saying, if I was going up for trial for my life, I would not want you to represent me. And then him affecting that hunch is so funny to me.
The stuff about how they only talk about the plot because it's a TV show and it's all about the plot, it reminds me of like Law and Order, where we don't really know about the detectives very well, except occasionally we have stuff like, I'll take care of it once I pick up my daughter from her new boyfriend's house. What? She's dating? I know, I can't believe it.
Yeah, they never get into that territory ever. I mean, occasionally you'll get what I would call an off-books mission, where it will be like a mob boss will be haranguing Dan Briggs and be like, we're kidnapping your friend's daughter. But you never get like, oh, I remember when I met him back in Sunday school or some bullshit. Like, you never get that. It's all the mission.
Right.
While this is all going on, we see someone outside of the grounds, hidden in the brush with binoculars. And I think we find out later that this is Laszlo, but I just didn't recognize him because there's so many just white dudes in here.
Yeah,
it's true.
Oh, totally.
And you'd think they'd be trying to find Laszlo, because earlier when he's like, go ask Laszlo about the mission, they didn't know about that, but apparently they don't do anything with it.
They got all their team trying to make this Sleeping Beauty prison. So I mean, what are you gonna do? The connection of him being asleep for 3 years or whatever.
Whoa!
What?
I just got that too. What?
Could be.
Hold up. When did Sleeping Beauty come out, though?
Like the Disney movie?
It definitely
It's
came
like the
out
40s.
in the 50s.
50s, right? Okay, it is before this, so that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure it's like not somehow the other way around. Okay, Rogosh back in his cell, peeping through the window.
Sleeping Beauty came out in 1959, so 5 years before this. Probably call it 4.5 when they recorded it. So, like, yeah, it was relevant. That makes sense. It was in the culture.
It could be a coincidence.
Coincidence? I think not. Rogosh is back in his cell, again, climbing up those manacles to see up the window. He must have gotten a lot of exercise doing that every single time. Because like every time we see him, he's up at that window. And it seems like he's just hanging there for a while. But as he's up there, he sees Colonel Clemmy being walked across the yard, and he tries to call out for him, but he doesn't see Rogosh and doesn't listen and doesn't respond. Dan Briggs goes into Rogosh's cell and basically tells him that, I can't get in touch with anyone. I'm a bad lawyer, so I can't help you in any way. And he says that Laszlo was shot last week. And he did his best to represent Laszlo, but clearly things didn't work out well for him.
Right. That's one of my favorite moments where he's like, I love that the stakes getting higher for him is like, yeah, I tried my best for your friend, but I couldn't really do much. And he's just like, get me the fuck away from this attorney. Like, just find me somebody.
So that's interesting because it reminds me of like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, where with these communist societies, if you're accused, you're basically dead. Like, you're not going to have a trial. The trial is almost besides the point. That's also why they love confessions. So I kind of feel like Rogosh, it's weird that he still feels like he kind of has a chance to talk his way out of it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
He loves his country. That's the whole thing.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of approaching this moment, but Barney plays the role of a prisoner at one point. And basically is like, this whole country's a damn prison, except in a Jamaican accent that I'm not even going to attempt. And it leads to Rogosh like getting actually fucking upset at him. He's like, shut up.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, national.
So he gets into a car. Major Clemmy's inside the car, asks if Rogosh was there, and he reports that this house has been converted to look like Stephen Castle. So
they're working together.
Which is at the only point where we find out that like this is supposed to look like an actual place. It's not just a random like prison castle. And
Colonel Clemmy is like, I want you to find Rogosh and rescue him, sir. No, kill him.
Dun dun dun. So Rogosh is back in his cell with Briggs, and he's telling him more information about what he remembers. He says, I bought tickets to leave on November 2nd because on November 4th. Briggs doesn't try to push him on that. It's like when he starts on November 4th. Like he just like actually talks about something else. Say, what about information about more recent events? It's like, oh, he doesn't try to push it, doesn't try to say, doesn't lead him too much.
Yeah, what you're getting to, Christian, is one of the strengths of this episode because it really doesn't feel like they're trying to push him one way or the other. Like sometimes he'll be saying details that are kind of important. They'll interrupt him, like especially with the opposing counsel, where he's like, "I planted the bombs," and he's just, or "I planted the virus," right? And he's like, "All right, the defense rests." All that.
Worth noting, 1966 was an election year, although it did happen on November 8th. In my head, I'm going, was this the writers making a dig at leaving the country because of the election?
Was that a thing back then?
It was during Lyndon B. Johnson's second term.
And we will talk more about that in our Spy Fact versus Fiction segment.
Nice.
Then I will shut up.
He starts eyeing the light as if like he knows that the thing is bugged, and so says, "I can't defend you. Keep defending you. They might try to arrest me for this." And he punches out Briggs, and then Willie comes to go get him. And Briggs goes back to the office. And they reveal, today is November 2nd, so they have 2 days to figure out what's going on. Also, like, who was it? Barney? Or one of them is like, I admire the restraint that you gave not to, like, punch him back.
I think it was Barney, yeah.
Action lawyer. He can lawyer and he can fight.
There you go.
Well, that's a common thing with Briggs. So, like, Briggs, on most episodes, is just this straight-faced guy. Whenever he gets to shine and show his true self, he's always this like really weird, outlandish, goofy, just pathetic character. But he also at the same time will knock a motherfucker out at the drop of a hat. Just like for no reason. Be like, you know what? No, I'm gonna deck you now. It is a common thing. He has no temper or no ability to hold his temper at all.
He does that later in this episode, right?
Yeah, he does.
The IMF mainly being like mind game agents. Dan Briggs being the lead of them is so incongruous. Him being just like, all right, I know how to fix this.
Does that change? I'm trying to remember, like, I've only seen a few episodes with Jim Phelps. I assume Jim Phelps is not in the same vein. He's more calculated, right?
Very calculated. I mean, throughout it, they're like, he's a genius. He is essentially, I would say he is Ethan Hunt Rogue Nation level, where he's trying his best to think his way through problems.
Right. Whereas Dan Briggs seems more Ethan Hunt MI2. All right, everything's gone to crap. Bring out the guns. Let's do this.
I want Stephen Hill in a John Woo movie in an alternate universe.
No.
Oh.
Rogosh going for exercise time. So Willie, gets someone out of the cell, bring him over, and he passes Cinnamon in another cell and stops Willie, saying, I want to talk to her, and starts bribing Willie with the cash that he had in his pocket to let him talk. And the female guard also drags Cinnamon over and leaves him alone. Cinnamon says that she was beaten and that she told him everything, but they don't want to believe what she's saying, and they wanted her to say that Rogosh is working for the Americans. They just want to know about America, nothing before or after. But she doesn't really know what happened in America. She wasn't there. They met afterwards. It makes sense because obviously he doesn't remember her.
Right.
So he starts asking, all right, what did I tell you about America? I like that he doesn't actually reveal he supposedly has amnesia to her. He's trying to play her while she's playing him.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool moments of that where he's trying to fish for information that they don't even know. And it just really shows how competent the team is.
Well, also in this scene it's a really 60s female character who's like, oh no, please, I'm so scared. Won't you save me? That we've seen a bunch of times in these old movies, but it's being lampshaded or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of my issues with the character of Cinnamon. I
Okay.
think that Barbara Bain is a phenomenal actress, but I think that the writers don't necessarily do her justice because of the time that this came out and just the mores of the land. Because she is able to do so much, and yet 90% of the time she's the honeypot. She's always the sex object, or she's always the girlfriend, and it's the same kind of relatively predictable character.
Right.
Even though you're like, oh, you could do so much more than that, honey. Please, let her off the hook.
She was being that character, but she was playing that character as the actress. So at least there was a level to it there.
Exactly. That's what I always have liked about her, which I'm not sure if you guys have this in your notes, but Barbara Bain won an Emmy every year that she played this character.
Right. I did know about that.
Her last season of Mission Impossible, she got fired off of it because Martin Landau walked when the creator walked.
Right.
And when she accepted it, she was like, well, I was one of the leads of Mission Impossible. Barbara Bain give no fucks.
Cinnamon tells Rogosh that, I told them all the private things about all the operations we did together. He said, did you tell them about the cultures, the bacteria cultures? How many died? Was I successful? And as this is happening, like you said, as this is something that we would want to know more about, Willie just pulls them away and is says, what's wrong with you? Because he's shouting at Cinnamon to the point of that Cinnamon acting is that she's in tears.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, but again, it's that thing this seems like something we need to know about. Let him talk longer. But no, they just pull him away because he's giving up information. This is actually, you know what this reminded me of? The Avengers, where Black Widow's playing Loki.
Yeah.
Yes.
To get that information about what the plan is.
I also thought maybe they thought they didn't want to push their luck. It's interesting to me that he's willing to say this to someone who he still doesn't know. They tell him that he knows her, but he has never met her.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do? Yeah.
Also, I noticed that Willie had a very American accent when he's like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "All right, what country is this supposed to be? Did they outsource their guards from America?"
Yeah, it's one of the more nitpicky things about this, that half the people in this foreign country are just all Americans.
That's true.
So Rogosh gets brought back to his cell, and then in the office, Barney and Cinnamon are there, and then Barney gets his shirt ripped open by Briggs, tells Willie, don't fake the beating.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great manager.
They'd say that he's a student agitator. Barney, at this point, is doing some sort of accent. I couldn't figure out what kind of accent it was, but it was some sort of accent.
It's Jamaican.
Is that what it was? Okay. He says that he was a student at UCLA, and of course, this gets Rogosh's attention. He says, "Oh, were you there in November '66? Oh no, I didn't get it there until January of '67. Oh, so you missed the epidemic?" And that's when it's, wait, what now? Oh yes, I missed it, but not the riots and martial law. Oh, panic lasted that long? Yes, demonstrating and looting. Wait a minute, what is it? What am I hearing now?
Yeah.
Suddenly relevant.
So what do you think was the idea behind telling him that his mission was successful?
So he has that forefront to be like, hey, I set up this successful mission for you guys that dismantled America for like a year or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It worked. He's comfortable telling people about it.
Yeah, exactly.
If he was successful. If he wasn't successful, he wouldn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and he'd have nothing to say during this this trial.
Is it trial or tribunal?
It gives him something to prove he is indeed a loyal citizen with, because here he is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans and all this chaos. And like, no, see, I did this. I'm trustworthy.
I thought he was going to be like, oh, you were at UCLA. Did I like know you? And I was like, Los Angeles is a big city. And it reminds me of that Mystery Science Theater joke. We're from up north. Oh, do you know Bob?
Yeah, but so while this is happening, Laszlo is outside on a roof. Oh, wait, no. I skipped ahead. Laszlo is sneaking around, and we're not sure what he's doing, but we see that he got into the castle. And Roland Hand gets disguised as Colonel Clemmy, and they hang him.
Yeah, but they don't hang it on screen. Like, it doesn't happen on camera.
That's true. Now you see him with like getting the hood put over his head and the thing, and I guess I'm trying to remember, you just see Rogosh's reaction, right?
Yeah, I wonder if it was 60s censorship.
Probably.
It is 60s censorship. I remember there's a great example of the censorship in Batman the Animated Series, where there is an incredible episode. It's like a what if episode where Batgirl is thrown off of a building by Scarecrow, and they're like, well, we can't watch her have that full fall. So they decide the best way for censorship to have it happen is to just show a POV from her father's car as the body lands in front of him. And it makes it even worse. Yeah. It's like,
that is a great episode. That's Over the Edge.
Yes, great episode.
Yeah. That's good.
So I actually also thought of Batman the Animated Series, because in that same episode, I watched a commentary of the creators, and they talked about that. Nathan mentioned, but also they're like, "Oh my gosh, is that like a coffin and a hearse in like a children's cartoon?" Man, we did get away with a lot back then.
Censorship is weird. I mean, if you've ever seen the show Hannibal, there is a moment where there are these blood angels where they have like their lungs.
Just watched that episode.
Yeah, great show. Are ripped out of the back to resemble angel wings, and it's grotesque. And they talk to the NBC censors, and they're like, "Hey, this angel scene can't fly." And they're like, "Well, what do we do instead of angels?" He's like, "No, the angel wings are fine. Just we see too much of a bare ass crack from them." Like, well, what do you suggest that we do? And they're like, "Well, just throw some more blood on it."
Oh my gosh.
Conversely, there is an episode that either I can't remember if it flat out didn't air, or if they aired it. And then, was it I was thinking of when the kids are the killers, because people freaked out so much at the idea of children being the killers. They were just like, "No, we're not going to air this." And like
it didn't air, and then they aired like a 20-minute like mini episode that was on NBC. I was a huge fan of that show. But yeah, talking about a different show.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, so Rogosh sees the hanging from his cell, and he calls for the defense attorney and says that I've got 2 witnesses that can attest to what happened to America. So they call this like emergency trial tribunal thing. And we get Roland Hand again acting as the prosecutor, and says that Rogosh was a double agent. Briggs, as the defense attorney, denies all the charges, and he says that there are secret operations that prove he was a loyal agent, but the court and the judges were not able to find any files related to these operations. So they call Cinnamon to the stand. And Cinnamon, she's very subdued. She's acting like she's been beaten, and that she has to tell them exactly what they want to know. Says that, no, Rogosh and Clemmy were part of a group that is pledged to destroy their government. And as this is going on, Laszlo's outside on the rooftop, and he's like getting out a rifle. Rogosh is trying to get them to ask about the secret operations that he says that he and Cinnamon carried out. But of course, he doesn't know anything about these because he only knows what Cinnamon told him. She denies knowing anything.
Yeah, basically, her and this friend both betray Rogosh.
Yep.
This is a weird scene for me.
Okay.
Because when we actually covered this, it ended up getting a lot of play because a lot of the people on that episode really liked it. I have a lot of weird problems with this scene because it's this entire trial, right? And so I get the idea of the trial going on and everything happening with Laszlo or Laszlo.
Yeah.
That's tense and that's great and I like it, and I even like the idea on paper of them faking this trial to trick him into finally giving up all the information. And as it gets into the end of the scene and the twists that I don't want to spoil before you get to it, like I start to get a little more into it. But there's this whole section of this trial where they're just like going through the motions of a trial, and we as the audience know that everyone on the tribunal is IMF. Like the only person involved is Rogosh, and so as they're going through all those motions, it's just okay. God, this isn't real. Can we just skip ahead? Like just move it on.
I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
The lesser actor, the guy who played Rogosh, there's like an actual tension to how much he's going to say to try and prove his innocence, and watching his reactions make those scenes worthwhile. But your points are still valid. I appreciate your opinion about the best episode of Mission Impossible.
I thought it was gonna be like, okay, this was gonna be one of those things where, all right, everything else doesn't stretch reality to me, but this is like they're able to assemble a trial that quickly and like get these judges. Like that's where my mind was at.
Well, if it's a show trial, which it should be because it's a communist country, then yeah,
That's
of course.
True. Yeah.
I also think it's interesting that it happens in a place with windows. How many courtrooms do you know have windows where someone with a rifle can look right into it?
I was wondering about that too.
You're not from not Russia. You don't know what their civilian architecture is like. They like natural light, okay? We just got to deal.
They like it being very sunny when someone's about to be imprisoned for the rest of their life.
Yeah, that was my other thing. Is like, wait, why are they holding this tribunal in the prison? If this was a real tribunal, wouldn't they hold it somewhere else? Like, I'm sure they have very fancy buildings, like we saw in The Man Who Came in from the Spy Who Came in from the Cold. They have very dedicated rooms for this sort of thing. Like, if this was a real trip, so this is what was my issue with it. I was like, I've let everything else go, but this is the thing that I was like stuck on for some reason.
I was too. It's legit, and Nathan has a point though that it is a testament to the actor who plays Rogosh that he takes this really ludicrous scene and it ends up being where he finally realizes that the game has been on and he's been manipulated the entire time. And that transition of him going, no, wait a minute, holy shit, you got me, guys, is a great sequence. Like it for all that I have issues with this, that is a phenomenal character turn, and he does a great job at it.
Yeah, but before that, let's go to Laszlo. Briggs is right about to call Barney to the stand, and he sees Laszlo like across the way with the rifle. Very obvious, Laszlo, not a great assassin, because he's like right in plain view. Come on.
I wonder how he was planning on getting out again once he shoots him.
I don't know. But so Briggs like starts rambling. Well, first he tells Willie, there's a gun across in the stairwell, deal with it. And then he starts rambling to the judges, who I guess are IMF and should have been clued in to the fact that I don't know. There's some good improvisation here, where it's
the repertory players.
Yeah.
I actually had the same thought that it's like, okay, this guy's our boss and he wants to keep talking, so let's just defer to him and let him keep talking.
But if you were an actual jury, or not jury, actual judges or your tribunal, would you let some rambling, snively defense attorney just keep rambling, or would you shut him up?
Well, what's more important, staying in character or the mission? It's not staying in character.
I'm just really glad you have just as many issues with the scene as I did. Because when we covered this episode, I was here going, this is driving me crazy. This makes no sense. And everybody else on the podcast were like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the best scene in the episode.
Like Nathan said, I appreciated the acting there, but there was just things, this doesn't make sense to me a little bit, but I'm okay going with it because it doesn't, thankfully his rambling doesn't last too long. It lasts long enough that you see Willie take out the guy with what looks like a judo chop.
This reminded me of the part in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country when Scotty stops the Klingon assassin with the rifle from killing the president of the Federation.
This does have a very similar feel to that.
I will say, just since we keep bringing up Star Trek, both these shows aired at the same time and often used a lot of the same sets and guest stars by CBS.
By Desolate Studios.
I want to say they literally shot like next door to each other. Like they had lunch together at Crafty.
And there's an episode that is Aaron's favorite of this season called The Carriers that has George Takei in it. And it is incredible. You guys would...
we should have watched that one.
You can watch George Takei attempt to dance in a nightclub where nobody else in the nightclub is actually trying to like maintain this illusion. So it's just a bunch of people sitting around having a very serious conversation where George Takei is doing this like little shoulder wiggle, which you, for the listeners, you can't see the actual video, but I'm doing it. And it's just like, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. It's wonderful.
Man. Laszlo gets taken out by Willie. Dan calls Barney up to the stand. Barney says that Rogosh implied he wanted to defect to LA when they were talking, which of course Rogosh is like, no, this is ridiculous. And this apparently was the straw that broke the camel's back. And like he starts saying that he wanted to find out if the results of my operation, and he starts giving the details, infect an entire city's water supply. You know, there's botulinum cultures with deadly strands of bacteria in 4 flasks in strategic locations. And they have a timing mechanism that breaks down the bottles. Starts giving details of all of the locations. And he's like saying the first, the second, the third. But as he's like going to say, let me draw you a map. And he goes to grab a piece of paper, which is underneath the chair he was sitting in. And as he knocks over the chair, underneath the chair, label from Southland Furniture Rental, LA. And this is where that turn that we talked about happens. We start to figure out that it was all fake all along. He's still in America. And I like this part, the fact that he realizes that Dan is the leader because he was the most sniveling guy.
I
love that quote.
Great.
It's such a great quote, which I think it's I had it up. It's like you're the most incompetent. Clearly, you are the leader. Or it's you, the most ineffective. You would be the leader.
That's it. Yeah.
It's interesting the range of emotions for him because he's like surprised that he has been tricked and then afraid because he's been tricked. But then he remembers, I still have one last thing I can hold over them. And he's going to exploit that or try to. It just doesn't really work. Also, I guess they had the intern in charge of chairs.
It's great that it is something that small that gives up their entire plot because with a lot of episodes of Mission Impossible, the plot isn't really like the villain doesn't know that they're being duped until at least 2 minutes, and they've already gotten away. This guy's smart. He fucking figures it out, and it's the smallest thing that gives him away. I love it. It's so great.
And when everything goes to crap, Dan Briggs punches him out.
Because Dan Briggs has a small penis, apparently.
It's also uncut.
Well, I was going to say, Dan Briggs, I'm not commenting on Stephen Hill. I don't know. But Dan Briggs, definitely.
Maybe he'd just been waiting all episode to punch him, and he finally did it.
There you go. It's payback for that.
I'm just waiting for the family of Stephen Hill to start listening to our recordings.
All right, so Rogosh wakes up back in his cell, and 3 of the vial flasks are in there with him. And you can hear this, ticking. Dan Briggs' voice is coming over the intercom. He says that the timing, he has 15 seconds to tell them the location of the 4th container. You just hear this very tense ticking.
Those vials look exactly like the VX gas in the rock.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad somebody else thought that. Very much so.
Oh, yeah. The similarity is just in the look between the actual nuclear devices and Fallout as well.
The 3 plutonium things that fall out. Yeah, that's what this reminded me of.
This scene was interesting. I don't really understand why it worked. Because you'd think such a big patriot would be willing to die for his country. But I guess the bacteria is some kind of horrible, like the rock, some kind of, you get mutated and it's really painful and then you die.
Chimera from Mission Impossible 2.
This didn't bother me because one of the tropes that I really enjoy about spy fiction is the loyal diehard who does care and will go to all lengths to do what they need to do. But the moment it really is real, that they're going to die now. and they're going to have to die for what they believe in. They shift completely. And it's like, no, I thought I could, but I'm not really ready to die right now, horribly melting.
Yeah, I'm going to assume it's VX gas.
This is VX poison gas.
VX nerve gas.
Bring it kind of a little bit back. VX gas is the type of gas that is the justification for that fucking plane stunt in Mission Impossible 5. So we're tying
right.
I love that all of us
remember
that it's called VX poison gas.
Well, I always remembered it because I was on the keto diet for a while, and I really loved Brussels sprouts. I mean, I still do love Brussels sprouts, but I get them fresh off the stock, and every time I would handle them, it would look like I'm carrying the fucking VX gas. I would constantly tell my brother, like, do not move that. Glass or plastic.
Okay. To jump back, VX poison gas is really what was on the plane in Rogue Nation. I have never caught that.
Yeah.
Not only are all Mission Impossible movies and TV shows technically canon and sequels, not reboots, like in the same universe, but that also means that The Rock is now actually in the Mission Impossible canon. Like,
by extension, the James Bond franchise. Because he's Bond.
He's
Connery is he's locked up in he's a spy, the British spy from the 60s who got locked up.
You're right.
Yeah.
No,
just Connery's Bond.
That's why Lazenby became Bond. It's because he got locked up in America.
No, we're not going to go codename theory on this. No.
Okay.
Zach is well aware of my codename theory page.
VX gas is an actual chemical compound.
It is. Yeah.
Don't ruin
this for me. Oh, I thought it was fictional. So there you go.
Details of it were fictional. I do have to bring this up because this is really funny. George W. Bush once tried to say during the Iraq War that they were having this terrible gas, and as he explained it, a lot of people were like, "You're reciting stuff you heard Nicolas Cage say in The Rock." He was like, "You spasm and then your back breaks right after your skin melts off," or something.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow. That's great. So I guess I realized we never said that he actually does give up the last location.
Yeah.
And also I like that the ticking was just a metronome that Barney was like playing over the intercom.
Gaslight
really good
on Gaslight, baby.
And then, here's the thing, they just let him go.
But he has that great line about, like, we're just going to let him go. And he says something to the effect of, like, no, we really didn't. Because people are going to kill him. Like that's going to happen.
It's not even that vague. He gets into the car with the real Clemmy and is like, so, I hear you told him everything? They tricked me.
This is a weird thing about Mission Impossible. In one of the early episodes, it might even be the pilot. They talk about, no, it's the second episode. They talk about having to remove a leader from a nation. And they flat out call out that, no, we're not going to kill him because that's not what we do. You know, we're not going to just shoot him with a rifle.
Right.
But they are awfully cavalier about flat out 100% causing people to die. Because in that episode, they're not going to kill him with a gun. They're going to get somebody else to kill him. And in this one, they're like, no, he's dead.
It's the Batman Begins, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you.
I will kill you, but I don't have to save you.
They even go further than that. We just recently covered an episode where the episode of Mission Impossible, like in the last 4 seconds, they blow the guy up. And it's like the whole thing is about tricking this guy. And then just goes off screen. And we, all of us watching the episode when we were talking about it, went, okay, just to confirm, they blew them up, right? Like that was real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you guys will have already heard that episode, The Diamond. And, and they don't give enough justification to straight up murder these two people off screen. They say South African dictator, and that's it.
Yeah. So the IMF will gank somebody if they feel it's needed. They just won't shoot him. They'll do it creative.
Right. Just so your listeners know this as being canon, we also recently discovered in an episode that we just recently released, but is like a year old now, called Elena, that once somebody is disavowed, they send a like non-IMF assassin to murder them.
What?
So yeah, think about how many assassins have been sent towards Ethan Hunt and then continue with your episodes.
Or, Luther, or what's his face? Krieger deserved it, but Luther?
Yeah.
Wow.
I like to imagine Ving Rhames getting an assassin off his tail. I love how I ended that sentence with, I like to imagine things.
The other thing to note about the end of this episode is that, like, when Colonel Clemmy, or Major Clemmy, as he actually is, gets there, like, it's all back to normal. There's no gallows there. It doesn't look like the interior of the castle anymore. It just looks like a random house.
Like they were never there.
Yeah.
That is every episode of Mission.
I love to imagine Rogosh actually trying to explain what happened. Like, yeah, they tricked me. And they're like, how did they trick you? Well,
oh my God.
Like, I got hit by a car, and then I woke up in this strange place, and they told me it was 1969, and I was an American spy, and I was banging my secretary, and, like, it was just really confusing, man. And then I went to a trial.
That was the episode. Now let's go into our spy fact versus spy fiction. So I've got a few things here. Delayed amnesia. Seemingly not a thing, but there was actually studies done whether it was a thing. Apparently there were concussed football players. This is a study done in like 1973. Concussed football players were interviewed immediately after they got a concussion, and they had like good recall for events that had occurred. But within 3 to 20 minutes, the recall for these events was lost. But in a control group, it was found that this delayed forgetting did not happen. So it's unclear whether or not it was a thing. But maybe by the time in 1966, they thought it was a real thing.
What you're saying is a more realistic plan would be to get NFL players to just ram into Rogosh.
It's like Terry Tate office linebacker works for
There you
the
go.
out.
And then later on, they make a movie where Will Smith is trying to tell the truth.
Oh, tell the truth. So like we said, we don't know what country Rogosh is supposed to be from. It's not Russia. But in 1966, when this would happen, the premier of Russia would have been Leonid Brezhnev, who was the first secretary of the USSR from 1964 to 1982. He was preceded by Nikita Khrushchev. And also, so going back to that radio, that Barney was faking, where there's a new president. It was 1969. There was a 1968 election. Lyndon B. Johnson was eligible for re-election, having served less than 24 months of JFK's term, but he decided not to run due to his failing health. Instead, running were Richard Nixon, Humphrey Hubert, and independent former Alabama Governor George Wallace.
I think you mean Hubert Humphrey.
Did I say that backwards? Hubert Humphrey, not Humphrey Hubert. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Hubert is a weird first name, so we'll let you slide on that.
And I mean, Humphrey,
They're both weird.
They're both first name. And Humphrey is a first name.
And I mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
See, I had it saved on my phone. I've been ready for this shit.
Okay.
Yeah, because 1966 was the midterm elections, too.
Right.
And so November 8th was the actual election. So right after these events would have occurred, right when this is airing, which Lyndon B. Johnson, he was not up because it was the midterms. But the Democrats apparently kicked butt and maintained control of both houses of Congress, which I'm reading about the 1966 election a lot, which this is cool, too. It was the first election to be held after the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. So this was like this massive surge of African-American voters who previously had a hard time voting because America is formed that way.
Was this the really contentious one that had like riots at the DNC, or was that earlier?
I want to. I do not know.
I think it might have been earlier.
I don't know.
Are you talking about the Chicago riots at the DNC?
Yeah.
Because that would have been 68.
So
it would have been.
It would have been the Nixon election then. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the presidential election then. That makes sense.
Yeah. Zach, did you have anything else for spy fact versus spy fiction?
I did my part with Stephen Castle.
All right, there we go. We go into our favorite quotes.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we might all have the same favorite quote.
All right.
Anyone want to go first?
Mine is the inspiring complete lack of confidence. Followed by him getting the hunchback or whatever the fuck he does with his posture.
Right.
Mine's that Rogosh quote that's, you are the most ineffective, so clearly you are the leader. That was my favorite bit.
Zach?
So I also like the complete lack of confidence. I liked you were born to hang.
Oh,
that's a good quote.
That's a good one, yeah.
I like the part where Rogosh says to his lawyer, "You toad." That amused me. And then I liked the final quote, "Sorry we had to let him live. We didn't."
Right. Yeah, that was my
That's-
favorite quote too. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. I mean, we've
Just
been
gotta
talking
steal
about all these
everybody's
quotes this
favorite
whole
fucking
time.
Quotes. It's a 50-minute episode of TV. We're bound to run into a few of them.
Okay, so now it's time for our ratings. We here on the Spy-Fi Guys, we do a ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis, 1 being awful spy movie, 10 being amazing and wonderful, everything you could hope for. So how would you guys rate this episode of Mission Impossible?
All right, let's let our guests go first.
I'd go an 8.5 martinis out of 10. I really enjoy this episode. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not it's not The Conversation. It's not fucking gonna say Enemy of the State, but that's not perfect either. But it is a really great episode of this show, and it shows you everything that you come to expect out of like a great Mission Impossible episode.
All right, Aaron.
Except for
I'm
Peter
gonna
Graves.
same thing. 8 out of 10. This is such a great spy story. The only thing really that keeps it from being just great is that it's a 50-minute TV show. So like it's just limited. I would love to see this story pushed out to 2 hours, add in some extra wrinkles, some extra development, some action sequences, and like this would make a really great thrilling Mission Impossible 8 maybe. Just something. Right? Like I'd like to see this done again. I dug it.
Zach?
So I will give it a 7 out of 10.
Right.
I like Mission Impossible, but I'm not like an uber fan like the rest of you. I thought this episode was pretty engaging. I wasn't bored. Nobody jumped out of a plane or nobody fought a tiger, and there weren't any crazy gadgets. Not that that's really a disappointment, but I thought it was like a pretty solid episode of a TV show that's still pretty old though. So that's
When
how I
does
feel.
somebody fight a tiger?
Thank you. I was curious about that myself. I started like, wait, did Bond fight a tiger?
You know what I mean? Like nothing crazy happens. Wait, did you guys do the preview for episode 8, Mission Impossible 8?
Yeah,
I
they were
remember
on
you
the
saying that you wanted him to fight a tiger.
So like that's the kind of rumors I was hoping you guys would talk about.
Oh man.
Like what crazy stuff was going to happen in the movie. Not, I heard this actor from movie 2 is going to come back.
Guys, you guys need to understand, this is one of the least crazy episodes of the show. I mean, we have our silliness ranking, and we have ones with heroin stuff, snakes, LSD,
Ghost
sugar
bees.
cubes,
See, that's what
ghost
I wanted.
bees. See,
Yeah, I want to repeat.
Yeah.
There is an actual ghost in an episode, and they end the
I need
episode
to
with
watch that
someone going,
episode.
I don't know, maybe it was real.
Okay, worst episode of that season, kind of fun still, directed by the same person as this one.
What?
I disagree.
Leonard
That's
J.
quite the
Wood,
contrast.
But yeah.
All right, Christian, what's your rating?
All right, so I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. The main reason that I wanted to watch this episode is because, and I'm the one who picked it, is because I knew that the part from Fallout and the beginning part of Mission Impossible 1 were based on this scene where they do this whole thing to trick someone into giving their information. I was like, all right, I need to see the original. And I liked it. I thought it was good. It was, like we said earlier, those things were just one bit of a larger story. So it was really good to see what they can do with that as like the entire premise of the episode. And I liked that. Like the acting was really good. There were 2 things that I was missing. And they could have been done in this episode. Like, I wanted a mask pull. We saw Roland Hand, disguised. I wanted a mask, just him pulling off a mask. And I don't know, I'm trying to, if they actually really do that a lot in the show, or is it just him getting disguised, putting on the makeup on?
Not yet. We just got to one of the very first actual full head masks in one of our more recent episodes, but like it definitely has not become a trope of the series yet.
Okay, all right. I was wondering about that.
To give you guys a little bit of like foray into the future, every episode I've watched the 80s show has a mask pull. So,
all right, okay. And the other thing I was missing from this was the part where all the walls fall down and they reveal it that is like a set, which obviously couldn't have happened here because it's an actual house, but I was waiting for that to happen when he's in the cell. That last part where he just has the 3 vials in them. I was waiting for like the walls to fall apart. He finds out it's not a real cell.
I can't remember if they've ever done that mouse trap or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
What's there's a name for it, but I can't.
Something like that. Yeah.
I can't remember any time that I've seen in the original show where they do that. I think that may just be a De Palma first movie thing.
Well, it's a great thing.
That's great. Yeah.
It happens. They do that a couple of times in the movies because they also do it when they do the big fake out with the nuclear apocalypse.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's just because in the TV show, there never really is a haha, we tricked you. It's haha, we deuced out 10 minutes ago. Deal with it.
Right. So those are the only two, like, other than, the thing about the trial. Even though it was weird, I went with it and I still enjoyed it. But overall, it was good to just get an episode. Other than, I think I've seen the pilot, and I've seen one or two of the episodes where they brought the syndicate in. But this was like a standalone episode that I've heard about so much, because McCoy likes to talk about this on podcasts. And I figured I need to watch it. So I enjoyed it. And also, I just loved having you guys on, because I sometimes on this show, I get way into something like a Mission Impossible thing, and Zach will have no idea what I'm talking about.
What are you going to do?
We are, I guess, experts. That was the reveal out of 2020 that really shocked me the most, that apparently I'm a Mission Impossible expert now.
A classic TV expert, actually.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Would you guys like to plug your stuff as is done?
Me personally, you can follow me on Twitter at Father Baldor. I also do the Mission Impodible podcast, where we talk about an episode or a movie of Mission Impossible, going from the very beginning to the very end. We're covering it all. And you can also find me over at oneofus.net on their home release podcast and an occasional movie or TV review.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Nathan Flynn. Like he said, Mission Impodible is our baby. The Twitter page is at Impodible, IMPODIBLE. And we also have our Instagram, which is Mission Impodible. Our Facebook, we got a Facebook group as well, the Impodible Missions Force. So if you just want to join the discussion, we also have a few interviews coming up. Actually, at this point, you will have heard us interview Brian Trenchard Smith and Leslie Ann Warren. And hopefully there have been like 1,000 more interviews since that point. Also, you can find me at oneofus.net.
Great. Well, thank you to Nathan and Aaron for joining us. You can find us on social media, the Spy-Fi Guys, under Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to rate and review us on iTunes. The theme music is by Jer Fitzgerald and Big Man Joe. Media reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.